We don't have to talk about how tough we are. We don't have to talk about how resilient we are. You guys are warriors. You're warriors. Good win. Break it down.
Lions shade their own player. Camp chaos, center confusion, and Jamo's mystery absence. What's going on, Detroit Lions fans? Welcome back to Detroit Scope. And if this is your first time pulling up a chair, do me a favor, think about that subscribe button. You don't have to hit it. Just think about it. Because right now we are grinding toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching this could be the difference maker. So if you like what you hear today, subscribing is the easiest way to say thanks, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Now let's get into it, because Sunday in Allen Park was a wild one. And by the time you're done watching this, you're going to understand why Lions Twitter nearly broke. The countdown is officially on. Ford Field is about to host its preseason opener, and the buzz in Detroit is electric. Season ticket holders have an open house this week, padded practices are in full swing, and the team is inching closer to real, meaningful football. But before we even get to Saturday's game, the Lions organization itself decided to stir the pot, and they did it in the most savage way possible. Here's the tea. The Lions' own social media account posted a practice photo that, let's just say, did not do cornerback Ennis Rakestraw any favors. In the shot, wide receiver Isaac T.E. is hauling in a contested pass, fully extended, and Rakestraw is trailing so far behind him that it looks less like NFL-caliber coverage and more like a kid chasing an ice cream truck that's already turned the corner. The internet had a field day. Fans were calling it disrespectful. Some were saying the Lions were throwing their own guy under the bus for engagement. And look, when your own team's account is out here posting photos of your hips getting flipped, that is not a good look, no matter how you slice it. But let's pump the brakes for a second and actually break this down like the analysts we are, because context matters. Rakestraw has been a lightning rod for criticism all off-season. He's a former high draft pick who's still trying to find his footing, and fans have been quick to pile on. But if you actually study that photo, Rakestraw isn't getting torched 20 yards downfield and left in the dust. He's right there. He's in phase. The separation isn't as dramatic as the photo might suggest at first glance. It's more a case of T.E. timing his hands perfectly and making a veteran-level adjustment on the football. Is it a flattering image for Rakestraw? Absolutely not. But is it evidence that he's getting cooked in coverage? Not exactly. Sometimes the receiver just wins. And on this particular rep, Isaac T.E., who has been searching for a bounce back after a rough showing in the first preseason game, looked every bit like the athletic weapon Detroit hoped they were getting when they drafted him. After a preseason opener where T.E. struggled with drops, seeing him snatch a contested ball away from a defensive back is exactly the kind of response fans wanted to see, even if it came at Rakestraw's expense in the photo department. So don't let the shade fool you, Lions fans. This isn't a 5-alarm fire for Rakestraw's roster spot. It's one photo, one rep, in one padded practice, in the middle of August. But it does keep the pressure on a cornerback room that is more crowded and more competitive than almost any position group on this Lions roster right now. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Alright, before we move on to the next piece of drama, let's pause for a second. If you're new here, this is Detroit Scope, your home for everything Lions, and we are on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers. We're not asking for anything crazy, just a tap on that subscribe button if you're enjoying the breakdown. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and it means we can keep bringing you this kind of inside look at everything happening in Allen Park. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Because the biggest storyline out of camp on Sunday wasn't about a cornerback at all, it was about the center position, and honestly, it's starting to feel like a full-blown soap opera. For months, the expectation has been that Seth McLaughlin, Detroit center from a season ago, would be the guy. Head coach Dan Campbell has praised McLaughlin's game repeatedly, describing him as a low-playing, quick, sharp technician who can anchor against interior pass rush even without elite physical tools. He's not going to blow anybody off the ball, and is not going to look flashy on tape. But by all accounts, he simply does his job snap after snap, play after play, and wins with consistency rather than dominance. If the season kicked off today, McLaughlin would almost certainly be the starter. But here's the twist. On a rainy Sunday at practice, it wasn't Seth McLaughlin taking first-team center representatives. It was Juice Scruggs and, more surprisingly, offensive lineman Tate Ratledge. Yes, Tate Ratledge. The same Tate Ratledge who has been so impressive at guard that Dan Campbell reportedly told him he didn't even need to suit up for the last preseason game because he'd already proven what he needed to prove. Now suddenly he's getting representatives at a completely different position. And it gets messier. Because it rained, there were center-to-quarterback exchange issues throughout practice. Snaps that didn't go cleanly, footing that wasn't ideal. That part is somewhat understandable given the conditions. But the more concerning wrinkle was the report of blown assignments, specifically when Tate Ratledge was lined up at center. Blown assignments at the most cerebral position on the entire offensive line, the position responsible for making protection calls and getting the whole unit on the same page, is the kind of detail that makes fans nervous. So what exactly is Dan Campbell doing here? There's an old saying that usually gets applied to quarterbacks. If you have two quarterbacks, you don't really have one. And right now, the Lions look like they might be dealing with a similar identity crisis at center. It started with Cade Mays as QB1 in this equation, but Mays got banged up. Then it shifted to Seth McLaughlin. Then Juice Scruggs got back into the mix. And now the coaching staff appears to be experimenting with shifting Tate Ratledge, arguably their most talented young interior lineman, away from the spot where he's already proven himself, to test him at center instead. One theory is that this is less about actually moving Ratledge permanently and more about cross-training. If Ratledge, McLaughlin, and Mays all develop a working understanding of how to make the protection checks at center, it gives Dan Campbell and offensive line coach Hank Fraley maximum flexibility if injuries strike during the season. And given how banged up this offensive line already looked in 2025, especially against interior pass rush from teams like the Minnesota Vikings, that flexibility might be exactly the point. But there's a real argument on the other side too. Tate Ratledge looked like a potential Pro Bowl caliber guard in the making. Some evaluators believe he has all-pro upside at that position. Moving him around during live padded practices, even temporarily, risks slowing down the development of a player who might already be one of the best pieces on this entire roster. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And right now, Ratledge at right guard is far from broken. Either way, one thing is becoming clear. The interior of Detroit's offensive line, once thought to be a strength heading into training camp, now has more question marks than it did just a few weeks ago. Between Cade Mays' earlier injury, the center carousel, and now blown assignments in the rain, Hank Fraley and Dan Campbell have real work to do before week 1. Now let's shift gears, because there's a name that was suspiciously absent from Sunday's practice, and it sent Lions fans into a mild panic. Jameson Williams, arguably the most electrifying and beloved player on this entire roster, was not at practice. No explanation was immediately given. No injury designation appeared. Just an empty spot where Jamo usually is, smiling, laughing, and lighting up practice with that trademark energy that fans have fallen in love with since he arrived in Detroit. Naturally, the internet started to spiral. Jameson Williams is must-watch television every time he steps on the field. And when a player that magnetic goes missing without explanation, fans assume the worst. But before anyone starts drafting their doom and gloom theories, let's take a breath. There was no injury report. No update from the team suggesting anything physical. The most reasonable read right now is that this was likely a personal matter, something unrelated to football that simply required his attention. Dan Campbell has a history of being upfront about injuries, so the silence here is actually a decent sign rather than a bad one. The expectation is that Williams won't play in Saturday's preseason game regardless, and frankly, there's no reason to risk your best offensive weapon in an exhibition game anyway. The real hope is simply that his back and full go well before the regular season opener. While all that drama was unfolding, there was actually some good news buried in the day's headlines. Edge rusher Derek Moore, working his way back into the fold, flashed some real ability at practice, making winning plays that had teammates and coaches taking notice. The plan now is to get him some run in the preseason game, likely in the range of a full first quarter to a full first half, to knock some rust off and let him feel real NFL speed for the first time. As one legendary running back has said publicly, there's nothing that fully prepares you for the jump from college to the pros. It doesn't matter if you played in the SEC or the Big Ten, the NFL is simply a different animal. Getting more extended run this preseason, while still respecting the fact he's nursing a groin issue, could be a real building block for Detroit's pass rush depth heading into the fall. And finally, let's talk secondary, because the cornerback room might be the most fascinating position battle on the entire roster right now. Christian Izien appeared to be the front runner at nickel cornerback, but rookie Keith Abney has been making a serious push, stealing starting representatives and drawing praise from Dan Campbell, who described him not just as a corner or a nickel, but simply as a football player, someone who makes tackles, gets his hands on the ball, and plays inside and outside the box with equal comfort. That is exactly the kind of versatility teams covet in today's NFL. Meanwhile, veteran Roger McCreary, who many assumed had a real shot at that nickel job, has seen his practice representatives shift almost exclusively to outside corner over the last several sessions. That doesn't necessarily mean he's out of the nickel conversation for good. Detroit knows he's capable of playing that role. But it does suggest the coaching staff currently favors Izien and Abney in that competition. If the season started today, the projected top corners would likely be Rock Yasin and DJ Reed on the outside, with Ennis Rakestraw, yes, the same Rakestraw from that infamous photo, pushing hard as a legitimate CB2 option. That would leave McCreary fighting for a role as the nickel or battling depth pieces like Nick Whiteside just to lock down a spot on the final roster. So there you have it, Lions fans. A social media shot heard around the fan base. A center competition that's more confusing than a Christopher Nolan movie, a beloved star receiver missing without explanation, an emerging pass rusher flashing real juice, and a cornerback room that's more crowded than a Black Friday sale. Training camp drama doesn't get much juicier than this, and we still have days to go before that Ford Field preseason opener kicks off. Before you go, I need one more thing from you. This channel, Detroit Scope, is working hard to hit 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, we cannot do it without you. If you enjoyed this breakdown, if you learned something new about what's happening with your Lions, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It genuinely helps more than you know. Drop a comment down below and let us know what you think is really going on with that center situation, or whether you think Jameson Williams' absence is nothing to worry about. Smash that like button, share this with a fellow Lions fan, and we'll see you right back here with the next update from Allen Park. Until then, this has been Detroit Scope. Go Lions!